I would like to pose a question to you. Where the hell is The Wolf Among Us 2? For real, where the hell is The Wolf Among Us 2? Like, the first game came out almost 13 years ago today, and the second game was announced and expected to release almost a decade ago. This game has been missing for so long. There's been almost no information regarding it. It's been through development hell. It's been restarted twice in development, and it seems to be all over the place. They seem to have no clue what they're doing over there at Telltale with this franchise. It's actually insane that this game has taken this long to come out. I made a video similar to this before, but it was mostly about The Wolf Among Us 1 and what I love so much about that game. But I did talk about the development process and issues regarding The Wolf Among Us 2. But I want to go a little bit deeper into it today because I found some more information regarding what's been going on with the game, why it's been MIA for basically like 3 years after they announced it. No, they're still making it. It's not canceled. Like, that's a sign of a game that truly is not doing well. We have to confirm that the game is not canceled. You basically have already lost half the battle. But yeah, I'm going to go through the issues that Telltale has been facing since the start of development for this game, as well as some recent information and rumors that might possibly shed some light on what's happening with The Wolf Among Us 2. Now, the first and possibly most important thing to talk about in The Wolf Among Us 2 is the Unreal Engine situation. So the previous build of the game was built in Unreal Engine 4. They also did a behind-the-scenes showcase of The Wolf Among Us 2's world, in which they recorded the showcase and I guess a replica set of The Wolf Among Us 2's world. And from my understanding, the world of The Wolf Among Us 2 that was present in Unreal Engine 4 is completely different from the world, like the current world of The Wolf Among Us 2 in Unreal Engine 5. And this right here, it kind of pisses me off because I've seen this nonsense with games before in the past, where games they switch from Unreal Engine 4 to 5, and it adds years to their development, not to mention like tens of millions of dollars in overall cost. All for a game to have a few more frames maybe, or slightly better textures, I guess, like whatever reason they want to give. But in the end, no one really gives a shit about that in an indie, episodic, single player narrative game. And one as stylistic as this one, like genuinely no one cares about that stuff. Especially since the new game, it looks just like the old game, maybe a bit crisper in terms of like the character models, but that noir art style, it doesn't really need some sort of like super resolution settings because again, it's already really stylistic. Like, take a look at the screenshots right here. These images are captured from The Wolf Among Us 2, so this is very close to what we'll actually see when the game, or if the game actually releases, and it looks barely indistinguishable from the first game. To be clear though, that's not a bad thing. Again, the stylistic and interesting art style or art direction, it generally triumphs like graphics any day of the week in my book, because who cares about photorealism graphics? But with all of this, I think that this single decision to pivot from Unreal Engine 4 to 5, effectively making the team redo assets and shaders and character models and things like that, that decision can give you a glimpse into the state of mind of the current leadership and how, they're so hellbent and focused on the wrong things. But, we'll get into that a little later. We have more stuff to get into. Now, the second thing we need to talk about is AdHoc Studios' involvement. Now, the studio behind Dispatch, which is AdHoc Studios, they're mostly comprised of former Telltale devs and founded by them as well. And they were at some point one of the main groups of devs that were working on The Wolf Among Us 2. They apparently have written parts of the story and script, which actually they think that is a better script than the first game, which is interesting to me. But they stopped working together with Telltale and they shifted focus to their own game and Dispatch because they needed to get that ready for launch and to get it released late last year. So yeah, overall, it seems whatever connection the AdHoc devs had with Telltale to help them make The Wolf Among Us 2 was short-lived by the fact that again, they made a poor decision from Telltale to transfer from Unreal Engine 4 to 5. No one would have cared about that. No one at all. And B, the release and massive success of Dispatch. AdHoc just revealed that they surpassed their original 3-year sales targets in around 3 months or so. So they're probably going to be either working on Dispatch Season 2, which there's been rumors of at the moment, or a completely new IP as their next project. And what this probably means is that AdHoc Studios, that does behind a very old school feeling Telltale style game, are probably never going to be touching The Wolf Among Us 2 again. The fact that AdHoc, they had this core old school team of Telltale devs like Chris Webber, who's now a writer and director for AdHoc, as well as their co-founders Dennis Lennart and Pierre Scheretti, once again, Telltale vets from the good old days. They're most likely never going to be touching The Wolf Among Us 2 again. Just a quick side note, you have no idea how many times it took me to say those names. Dennis Lennart and Pierre Scheretti. Like, I had to say those names so many times to make sure I didn't f it up. But I guess I should segue that into some good news regarding The Wolf Among Us 2 and the fact that they have returning talent from The Wolf Among Us 1. So it was confirmed quite early in development that both Adam Harrington and Aaron Yvette, actually much easier names to say than those other names, but they will be reprising their roles as both Bigby and Snow White. Adam Harrington and Aaron Yvette, they work so well together and their chemistry is so good. So I'm really happy to see that they made at least one really good decision in terms of reacquiring voice talent. They're also bringing back the first game's composer, Jared Emerson Johnson. The Wolf Among Us 1 has easily like the top 10 best soundtracks of all time. I think this is also really good news as well. Now, if you want to break down on Telltale's history and what's been going on with the company and, to sort of bridge the gap between The Wolf Among Us 1 and 2, I've already gone over it in a video in the past, so I'm just going to put that clip into this video since I already talked about it. Now, initially, The Wolf Among Us was supposed to be a direct prequel to the Fables comics, which is obvious after reading just chapter 1 of the comics, but over time, it did sort of become its own thing. Telltale struggled with making sure that choices felt meaningful while still keeping in line with the established lore. They even delayed the game for months to fine-tune things, which looking back was a blessing because the final product was so well put together and bug-free, and something modern games could only dream of having on release. When it finally dropped in 2013, which I actually played in 2013 when I was just 13 years old, it got glowing reviews, but it never quite reached the mainstream success that The Walking Dead did. I'll quickly go over the struggles of The Wolf Among Us 2, and this is where it gets really rough. For years, fans were begging for a sequel. Telltale had hinted at it, but nothing concrete had materialized yet. And then, bam, 2018 hit, and Telltale Games collapses. They laid off nearly their entire staff, leaving The Wolf Among Us dead in the water. But this is where it actually gets even crazier. In 2019, LCG Entertainment revived the Telltale brand and retained the rights to... Let me see if I can get this right without looking it up, because I read back on it. It was definitely the Batman Telltale series as well as Puzzle Agent. I love those games. I know for sure that they didn't retain the rights to The Walking Dead because Overkill completely screwed the pooch with that canceled The Walking Dead game. But that's another story I don't want to get into. And I think The Wolf Among Us was the last IP they retained, but I'm not sure. Either way though, fans were hyped by the announcement that The Wolf Among Us 2 was in fact in development, but behind the scenes, things still weren't going smoothly. They restarted development from scratch because they wanted to switch from Telltale's old game engine to the Unreal Engine 5. Then in early 2023, the team announced another delay was coming. They didn't want to crunch their devs like a lot of other modern studios do, which is a good thing, but it also meant that the game was still nowhere close to being finished. But to sort of bridge the gap between The Wolf Among Us and a possible Wolf Among Us sequel, let's talk about how The Wolf Among Us connects to the Fables comic. Like I said before, the game is technically a prequel, but it takes a lot of liberties. In the comics, Bigby is a little less of a mess than he is in the game, and Snow White plays a much bigger role in the larger story. One of the biggest differences is how the game handles certain characters. For example, the Crooked Man, who is a major villain in the game, doesn't really exist in the comics. Instead, a lot of the conflicts come from larger threats like the adversary, the main antagonist of the Fable series, and also just the Fables themselves like Snow White's sister, Rose Red, and her boyfriend Jack. If you've never played The Wolf Among Us, do yourself a favor and dive in. And if you have, you can go read the comics. They're actually really good. They're a bit different in tone, and overall I would say it's not as good as the game, but if you want more of Fabletown, then it's there for you if you wish to do so. Now the final thing I really want to talk about in this video is the community sentiment for the fans of the Wolf Among Us franchise, because it's actually incredible. Like, I've never seen such a passionate but depressed community, for good reason of course, but the community that the Wolf Among Us has formed is insane. Over the last decade, people still discuss this game. They still make fan art on it, and they still give their theories on the next game's setting and story and stuff like that. Like, it's the sort of passion that really makes me feel bad for these people who've been engaging in it and they've just seen nothing in return. It kind of reminds me of Bloodborne fans in a way. Well, besides the fact that the Bloodborne fans, they think that every other Tuesday there's going to be an announcement and it's, oh, Bloodborne remake, and sorry, that's never happening. But I asked the Wolf Among Us community on Reddit what their thoughts were on the current situation regarding the Wolf Among Us 2, and I got a lot of interesting answers that I wanted to go through. Now, the first comment here from OK Narwhal says, I am confident that we're not getting the Wolf Among Us 2. That if we do, I will personally redact it every single developer 15 times. Now, we're just going to ignore that redacted because I think I'd rather not know what they want to do. But I get the sentiment that many fans would do anything they can to see the Wolf Among Us 2, including like crowdfunding. Like, I think if Telltale opened a crowdfunding project, that a lot of Wolf Among Us fans would support it. The second comment, coming from Educational Dish, says the OG game getting a remake is a sign that it's not a fully dead horse, but also can't really see the game coming out anymore. It's in this weird limbo where it definitely exists, but also seems to be just out of reach for both the publisher and the consumers. And I did hear that either The Wolf Among Us 1 might get a remake, but genuinely it would depress me. Like, I go back and play The Wolf Among Us, the original one, every year or so, and never once have I thought that game needed a remake. But we live in this remake era where everything needs to be remade instead of making new shit. So I'm not really surprised that something like that does happen, but it would actually kill my drive to talk about games anymore if The Wolf Among Us got a remake before the second game comes out. Another comment here from Vicarian says it's not coming, which I already said that back then. It's probably not going to be coming out, and I still have a little hope, but that hope is going downhill fast. And another post here from, I don't think I can say that name, but this post says, I have heard that the Telltale Games team went to Argentina to a development team there to help them make the game, and there may be a release date by 2027. I actually did see that rumor as well, that The Wolf Among Us 2 might be releasing in 2027. But the only reason why I question the validity of that rumor, this game has been delayed twice, has restarted development from scratch twice. I'll believe it when I see it. Now, as for the other part of that, the dev team from Argentina, I've tried to look at dev teams that were from Argentina to see if any one of them sort of fit the profile of, I guess a team that might help on a game like this. But if this particular rumor is true, it actually gives me a little bit more, and it gives me a little sliver of hope for the game. Because again, seeing as Telltale have had poor resource and deadline management for years now, and they keep running projects into the ground. I'm not understanding how they constantly do this. So if they're allocating some of the development process to a different team in Argentina, I think that no real bad can actually come out of that. Because if the game's going to be canceled anyways, or if it's years down the line because it's Telltale, then who cares if another dev team is also working on the game? But yeah, that's all we had to go over in terms of The Wolf Among Us 2 and the rumors and new information we have regarding, where it's currently sitting at. Honestly, I'm very disappointed in Telltale. I can see now why, I remember back in 2018 when they were basically going bankrupt and about to close doors. I can see now why that happened, because even when maintaining the few IPs that they do now have, they still have poor resource management and project management, and they just seem to just waste time. And I don't understand why it's taking this small indie game. It might be closer to AA by the time it releases, but it's taken so much time and money on this little small niche game. It's actually insane. They're treating this like some sort of AAA release where it's constantly delayed and they constantly need to just make things more perfect. This isn't GTA 6. Why is the game taking GTA 6 time? I just don't understand. We're going to get GTA 6 before we get The Wolf Among Us 2. Do y'all understand how crazy this sounds? A game that's probably going to be defining generations to come over a game that's it's a much more smaller niche indie style, very focused story driven game. It's crazy. I'm mind blown. But yeah, again, like I said, I do have a sliver of hope. If the game ever actually does release, I will be over the moon ecstatic. That's probably going to be the most happy I'll probably have been in my entire life, because I just have probably 5% hope that it's ever going to release, just to be honest with you. Despite what Telltale says, it's not canceled, this and that, blah, blah, blah. We've heard this from so many devs in the past. Oh, this isn't canceled. Oh, this actually works in the game. Oh, trust us, trust the process. And it doesn't end up panning out, because a lot of these devs, they can't be trusted, or it just seems like something's not right. Usually something's not right. Usually where there's smoke, there's fire. But again, with all this, we'll just have to wait and see. I'm pretty sure this video is not going to find one of those big audiences like my recent videos have, just because, again, it's not a AAA game, and it's a game that's going to do development hell. But I just really wanted to make this video for me, and I guess the small community of people that might find this video interesting. So yeah, if you have any thoughts on The Wolf Among Us, either 1 or The Wolf Among Us 2, then let me know those thoughts in the comments down below. But yeah, anyways, that's it for me. I'll see you next time.